Do y'all know the story about what lies beneath the aqua blue waters of Lake Jocassee? Well, there's a pretty interesting history behind all of it, so let's just get right into it, shall we? I am a born and bred native of the South Carolina mountains, so this story really literally hits close to home for me, and it makes me a tad emotional, so you know what, it's gonna be fine. We're just gonna get into it. But Lake Jocassee is a very pretty lake that is mostly in the upstate of South Carolina and just ever so slightly touches western North Carolina. And most of the land surrounding the lake is protected by the Jocassee Gorges, which just adds to this thought of untouched beauty. It's not untouched, but we'll get into that. But there are fewer than 50 homes on the lake, which for the most part were grandfathered in before the lake was even constructed. Thank God, because otherwise there would be some gaudy, gated community filled with BMWs and Land Rovers taking over the place. Also, side note, why are the people that live in these communities always so obsessed with the fact that the South doesn't have New York bagels? You don't need a bagel. If you need one so bad, go back to your frozen wasteland. Frigid bitch. But anyway, I digress. Although that is a rant that I do love to go on. The only easy way to publicly access the lake is through Devil's Fork State Park in Oconee County. And it's a really pretty park. It has a kayak launch and boating ramps and camping, and it is so popular in the summertime. There's often a line to get in if you don't go early enough. Duke Energy completed the construction of Lake Jocassee in 1973, which was only 50 years ago, which was not that long ago. It was created for hydroelectric power and flood control and is part of the Kiwi-Toxaway Hydroelectric Project, which is also owned and operated by Duke Energy. Jocassee is also known for its supremely clear waters because it's directly fed by these mountain rivers. Its clarity also makes it a popular spot for scuba divers, and there's even a dive shop that you pass on the way to Devil's Fork. The visibility is usually over 15 feet and is up to 50 feet in many spots. And today's scuba divers are the only folks that get to lay eyes on the ghost of the beautiful valley beneath the waters, which is Lake Jocassee. So the first thing that I want to tell y'all about is the Atakulla Lodge. So most man-made structures were demolished before Lake Jocassee was flooded, but there is one that remains at the bottom to this day called the Atakulla Lodge. The lodge was operated as a bed and breakfast for nearly half a century before closing to the public back in the 1960s before the lake was created. The exact date when it was built is not known, but it's estimated to have been sometime in the late 1800s, and the final owners of the lodge were the Fletcher family. You may be wondering, how did the Atakulla Lodge resist the crushing fate of Duke Energy's bulldozers before being flooded? So it's actually a pretty cool reason that I like a lot. The Fletcher family didn't sell their land to Duke Energy, so Duke Energy did not have permission to demolish what wasn't theirs, and in the end they flooded it, obviously, but it was the principle of the matter, kind of like a captain going down with their ship. The Atakulla Lodge stood proudly as the waters rose. I think that the Fletcher family was really cool for that, and I love that. And on that note, Debbie Fletcher of the Fletcher family wrote a book about her childhood memories of the Jocassee Valley in a piece called Whippoorwill Farewell, Jocassee Remembered, which you can still purchase, and I encourage you to learn more about it. There's also an interesting and kind of heartbreaking article that was first published by the Greenville News back in 2005, which interviews Debbie Fletcher and her memories of the Jocassee Valley. Well, they interview her about her memory, you know what I mean. One section of the article reads, "The whitewater converged like fingers on a hand, with 4 sibling streams that are lost, now nothing more than an unseen source of pristine reservoir providing scenic mountain recreation and power for progress." And that sentence just struck me. The article also describes how Debbie swam in the lake for the first time 10 years after it was constructed, but she quickly jumped out because it, quote, felt like a graveyard, which I can't even imagine. And it goes on to describe another notable place in the valley, quote, "Not far from the lodge, The Victorian-inspired Whitewater Inn provided comfort for travelers before it became Camp Jocassee, a private camp for girls in the 1920s. And incredibly, one reason that we know the lodge is still standing today is because divers have gone down to see it at the bottom of Lake Jocassee, which is incredible. So in 2003, professional diver Bill, Ruth, or Ralph, sorry about the pronunciation there, got in touch with Fletcher to ask her about the lodge, believing that it could still be intact. Following his intuition and using GPS data, Ruth took a boat trip the following year in August of 2004 to where he thought the lodge might be. For the rest of the story, I think that the article puts it well, so let's read directly from there, shall we? What the divers found was a building largely preserved down to the paint on the handrails. The frigid temperatures and lack of oxygen had helped slow the decomposition process. They had landed on a portion of the lodge's roof. Fletcher had always regretted not grabbing some piece of her beloved home, even if it were just a doorknob. While swimming around the lodge, a diver, Charles Johnson, pulled a loose wooden panel, a piece of side light that had been mounted next to the front door. He brought it with him to the surface, and it now hangs in the Fletcher's dining room. Oh my God, does that not just make you want to cry? That made me well up a little bit the first time that I read it. That is so impactful. And what's even cooler is that a month after the first dive, Ruth went down again to the lodge, but this time he had a copy of Debbie Fletcher's book, Whippoorwill Farewell, sealed in plexiglass, and he set it on the front porch of the lodge. So it's down there today. And if that story does not give you chills, I just don't know what will, because that is so impactful and cool. But before there were any lodges or camps in the Jocassee Valley, the Cherokee Nation called this area of the mountains home for a long time, and we can't talk about the history of the valley without including their story. So I dug up a few things that I think would be cool to share with you as well. So this map gives you a better idea of the expanse of the Cherokee settlements in modern-day South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. However, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the many settlements that would have been in the Jocassee Valley, including East Otoe. I did find these maps at the Museum of the Cherokee People in Cherokee, so shout out to them, they're awesome. Many of the sites of these settlements along the Kiwi River are underwater today. The valleys of modern-day South Carolina that were once home to the Cherokee now sit beneath Lake Jocassee and Lake Kiwi, which were flooded in 1973 and 1970 respectively. The Cherokee are also where we get the name Jocassee in the first place, and it is a really interesting legend. So roughly translated, Jocassee is a Cherokee word that means place of the lost one. The story behind the name is one that I have always found pretty interesting and cool. So, according to the legend, Jocassee Valley was once inhabited by two Cherokee tribes who lived on either side of the Whitewater River that Debbie talks about in her book. So the west side was ruled by the Brown Vipers, led by Chief Atakulla. Sorry again if the pronunciation is bad, but you may remember him earlier as the namesake for the Fletcher family's lodge. And the east side was inhabited by the East Otoes, which roughly translates to Valley of the Green Bird, and is thought to reference the now extinct Carolina parakeet, which would have also found a home in the Jocassee Valley. And also, everything is interesting to me. The bird was the only parakeet native to North America before going extinct in 1904. Like, we used to have a parakeet. Oh my God, but back to the legend. The Brown Vipers and East Otoes were rival tribes, and one day a brave young man from the East Otoes named Noguchi was hunting on Brown Viper land. While out, he fell, broke his leg, and lay on the ground, fearing his imminent death, because that would really suck to be laying there with a broken leg. But then he heard singing in the distance, and it was Princess Jocassee, of the brown vipers. Noguchi, being in a somewhat sticky situation, called out to Jocassee. She took pity on him and brought him to her tribe to nurse him back to health. Eventually, the two of them fell in love. Cute. But remember, these two crazy lovebirds, no pun intended because of the Insta reference, were from rival tribes, which is very Romeo and Juliet. So their forbidden romance would not end with a happily ever after. After a skirmish between the two tribes, Jocassee's brother killed Noguchi, and being a sicko, brought the head of his sister's love back to her. Great. So in response, Jocassee, without saying a word, got into her canoe and paddled out onto the water. Still looking back at the head of Noguchi, she stepped out of the canoe and walked out onto the water to meet the ghost of her deceased lover. This legend is how we get the translation for the name Jocassee, which is Place of the Lost One. Fitting, isn't it? The place of the lost one in a place lost to time forever. And this is where I want to get to some final thoughts. We are now leaving the land of history and fact and getting into my personal opinions and feelings about all of this. So thinking about the beauty lost at the bottom of Lake Jocassee, it just makes me sad, y'all. I'm not sure how else to put it. Even though the lake was constructed over 20 years before I was born, I feel like Jocassee Valley is a place that I should have seen with my own eyes. Jocassee Valley is what prompted me to start researching these underwater towns and communities in the first place. Like, my papa even remembers what the valley looked like before he passed, but I firmly believe that these places should be memorialized somehow. And the hippie side of my brain is uneasy with the thought of man-made lakes in the first place. I understand why they were constructed. I do. Logically, I do. But I also have the capacity to carry that understanding and my uneasy thoughts at the same time. We can think two thoughts at once. What can I say? I'm talented that way. But although I think Jocassee Valley is beautiful, it feels wrong in a way that an entire livelihood and all these memories were sunken beneath the surface. And lakes also tend to attract those loud carpetbagger Yankees and really shitty tourists who treat areas poorly, which just quite frankly pisses me off and is also a rant for another day. So let's end this on a happy note though. Y'all now know the stories of the places beneath Lake Jocassee, which is a powerful thing. Stories are powerful, so tell your friends about them. And let's not let the memories of these places die. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Underwater Appalachia and that you will consider subscribing to the Wandering Appalachian YouTube channel. I make videos about Appalachian history and culture and nature and all kinds of things, and I think I'm gonna start getting into a little bit like less Appalachia specific but more just like being unplugged. I don't know. We'll just see what I do. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed it and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.